systems that we have. I'm going to say that 12 times in this class, never mind, but all of them are fascinating, but it's fascinating. How many of you took or are taking, I forgot the number of the class, but the psych biology or biopsych, or how do you call it, biopsych or psych? Biopsych. What's the number? No, not 210. Oh, I think it's 220. Okay. Yeah. 210 is the statistics one, right? Yeah. So 220. So there will be some overlap in this section when we come up to talk about that. I mean, maybe even some of you took more introduction to neurobiology. So there will be some overlap. Some of you who took physics, we will overlap in some cases. That's just to introduce it. Okay, so the nervous system, we're going to divide it into what I first call the fundamentals of the nervous system, which will start with general organization that we will talk about today. In the basic unit, the cells, the neurons and the glial cells that we will discuss on Thursday. We'll then talk about the fascinating stuff, the neurophysiology. We'll talk about different potentials, resting memory potential, local memory potential, of course, action potential. The key player here that allows us to transmit a signal from point A to point B along the axons. And then this will all be at the cellular level. We'll start to see how cells communicate with each other through synapses. So we'll talk about synaptic neural interactions through synapses. All of these are under the fundamentals of the nervous system. Then we'll have a couple of class meetings about the brain, a bit about neural circuits, as much as we can, then we'll talk about sensation. That's going to be our nervous system. Okay? If you're ready to start, now we're starting. Give me a thumbs up, so we'll see. Okay, we're good. So, our learning objectives for today, or for this part, not just today, to classify the components of the nervous system, to describe the basic unit of the system, the neuron. All of these are going to be, and the BBB and CSF, all of this is going to be on Thursday. Today we're going to just talk about the general construction or organization of the nervous system. So, as I mentioned, we like to put things in different drawers. We like to say to put things in different divisions. It's not essential, but it helps us. Instead of talking about a whole forest, just to talk about groups of trees. And scientists will typically think about the whole nervous system as two parts. The central nervous system, also known as the CNS, and the peripheral nervous system. And due to my accent, I'm not going to use the acronym for that because that will address different organs that are part of the reproductive system that we'll discuss at the end of the semester. So I'll just say peripheral, you can imagine what it is. The central nervous system, unlike what many people think, is not just the brain. It's the brain, and don't forget the spinal cord. Sometimes they work together, sometimes each of them is working by itself. The central nervous system is our control room. If you've ever seen a war movie, a cheap B movie, when you have all the generals sitting, right, maybe the chiefs of staff or the president are sitting in a room, and they hear all the information, and they need to make a big decision. Should we press the button, the red button, or not? Maybe it's an atomic bomb or whatever that is, right? They're making decisions, hopefully, based on information. Hopefully making the right decisions. This is our central nervous system. This is the brain and the spinal cord. We talked about homeostasis. So if it's cold outside, I need to warm my body up. Who will decide that we need to warm it or not? And how? That's going to be the brain and the spinal cord, a CNS. Okay? But they're not there in the front line. They don't get all the information. They need to get it from somewhere, and they are not the ones who are going to actually send the missiles or do whatever actions. For that, we have the peripheral nervous system, which is basically nerves. I added here because we cannot see it in this resolution. Also, the sensory receptors, we'll talk about them. These are structures that are responsible for receiving inputs from the outside as well as from the inside to tell us what's going on, basically. Do we have, anyone knows, we didn't study it yet, do we have nerves in our central nervous system? What do you think? Yes or no?
Yes.
Just say yes or no, all right?
Yes.
Yes, we don't actually. So we don't. But that's an example of just a definition. Why? Because in the central nervous system, we call them tracts. It's not that they're different. They're still neurons, we definitely have signaling going on, synapses and what have you, we just call them tracts. And this is something you'll cover more in the lab rather than the class. But when it comes to the peripheral nervous system, we have nerves, we divide them, we classify them into the cranial nerves, nerves in the head and the neck, and all the rest that emerge from the spinal cord or reach the spinal cord. These are the spinal nerves. Any questions? I'm going to start big picture and just go more and more into details. Okay. So how does it all work? This is a very basic circuit, and we always work through circuit. And these three components are always there. Input, processing, and output. Always, for whatever action you make.